Welcome to Under the Lens. Come and enjoy an extraordinary, raw, and unfiltered podcast that delivers debate, discussions, and interviews about film, pop culture, and everything in between. Here is your host, film critic and journalist, Byron Lafayette.
Greetings, everyone. I am, of course, your host, Byron Lafayette, and today we have what is sure to be a very fun episode. We are going to be doing a retrospective of Season 2 of Strange New Worlds. And for those of you who have listened to the retrospective of Picard Season 3, I think you know that you're probably going to be in for a treat. First off, I would like to say if you have not seen Season 2 of Strange New Worlds or you haven't finished it yet, I would suggest probably to put this episode on the back burner until you finished it, as we are going to be going over probably all of the spoilers and everything major that goes on with the characters and episodes. So definitely come on back if you have not finished the show yet. I have two guests with me today who will be joining in on this conversation, and they are actually brothers, Curry Morris and Jordan Morris. And longtime listeners of the show will probably recognize Jordan from his participation in the past Star Trek episodes. And Curry and I have been planning for a long time to have him on the podcast. And what was funny was we made all of these different types of plans for all these movies, all these different types of discussions. And then it ended up, he came on to the show on an episode that we never even had talked about having him on for. So it just turned out really, really well to have both of them on at the same time. They both love Star Trek. And so thanks, guys, for joining me today.
Yeah, good to be here. And hey, I did show up that one time for the top 10 Christmas movies. We did do that one.
That is true. Yes, you were here for that one. Yes. Uh-huh. Oh, that was a good episode as well. I remember that one.
It was fun.
You know, it's great. I actually have my actual Brocutus on the episode with my current Brocutus. So.
Nice. I understood that reference.
Yeah. It's the Captain America line.
Yes, that's right.
Oh man. All right. So, I have a feeling probably most of these episodes are going to be a bit of a love fest, probably with this season of Strange New Worlds. But overall, let's start off with our overall feelings on this season. How do we feel it compared to season 1? And, did it live up to our expectations and so on? Why don't you start us off, Jordan?
So, obviously, I was very excited for this once it started. I've been chomping at the bit for season 2 to get started. A lot of the discussion going into season 2 talked about how they were just doing everything bigger this season. And, I wasn't so much worried about a letdown. So sort of like I liken it to like Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2. They're both actually about the same in terms of quality, but you had no expectations for 1 and had huge expectations for 2. Whereas I thought this season delivered. I loved every minute of it, and they took some risk, I think we could all agree on, a musical episode and some other things we weren't expecting, and they just knocked it out of the park.
And I totally agree with what you said, and I'll let you go next, Curry, before I put my thoughts in.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Jordan, who I know as Jordy growing up, or I'll just shorten to Jord for the episode. But Jordan and I pretty much would agree. I texted him throughout. I waited until the season was over so I could binge it, just with life being kind of crazy this summer. And I think not having to wait week to week made it an even better experience for me for this show. But I also really just appreciate how they continue to do episodic storytelling, like each episode kind of doing its own thing. It's not your typical streaming series, so the week to week probably won't bother me as much. And I can definitely see myself going into season 3 looking forward to it each week if I'm able to watch it in that format. But like Jordan said, it's not a step down from season 1. It's very consistent with season 1, I think is the best way to put it. It's a very, very great season with some really memorable episodes and a lot of meaningful character development. Not every episode is as strong as the last or the next, but none of them were bad, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself and really enjoyed the obvious love for Star Trek canon and history in there, and that they weren't afraid to take some risks that, in my opinion, paid off, like George said.
I totally agree with you guys because, I liked the analogy you used, Jordan, with Guardians of the Galaxy, because it was very much that way with season 1. Like, I had absolutely no idea what to expect, from this show. I liked Pike, and I liked Anson Mount's portrayal of him from Discovery season 2. And so I was kind of excited because I was like, okay, he was great in that show. He's probably going to be good, in this as well. But I still had no idea what to expect, and just kind of, the very, TOS feeling, I guess you could say, of that kind of fun adventure, not, a crew, not, knowing what is going to come next, was very, very interesting. And I think, season 2, I was so very excited for it, since I enjoyed season 1. And I think it's safe to say that it really, it really went beyond my expectations, because, sometimes with second seasons of shows, they tend not to be quite as good. And as you said, Curry, not every episode was, as strong as the one before. But I think, legitimately, I could say there wasn't a bad episode in this season, and all the characters did really well. I enjoy serialized storytelling as much as anybody does, but, I really enjoyed going in week to week and kind of, knowing like, oh man, I'm going to get a bookended adventure, kind of, almost like a mini movie that, I didn't have to worry about, like, oh man, I have to wait for, to see the next reveal or whatever. It was kind of relaxing in that sense of that old, next generation style of storytelling. So I think the writers and the producers and the directors and everyone just really kind of hit it out of the park, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. I think too, it's pretty crazy, some of the stuff they were able to accomplish. Now, obviously, and I'm sure we're going to get into the weeds of this soon. And George will be much more educated on the deeper things of the Star Trek canon and timelines than I am, but I'm no slouch. They took some bold choices with like the timeline and deviations from where Strange New Worlds takes place versus the original series. The biggest one in like season 1 was the Gorn being the way they are. And why are the Gorn like these terrifying, like fast lizard creatures when it's like a giant hulking slow lizard that Shatner boxes in the original series, which I have a theory about that I'm going to share at some point. But the war with the Gorn and like the timeline stuff, I thought was just fascinating how they handled it, and how this is technically like a prequel to almost all of the Star Trek shows, bar a few of them. But in some ways it feels like a follow-up because of those timeline changes.
Definitely. Yeah. Like they took some bold moves, and, honestly, I was wondering, when the show was first coming out, like kind of who the, overarching, big bads were going to be for the show. Cause every Star Trek show has that. And I was surprised when it turned out that it was the Gorn. I was not expecting that at all. And I was also not expecting them to go in kind of the alien vibe, I guess you could say, for Gorn, the eggs nesting in people and all this and that. I was like, I did not expect that to come, but I was very pleasantly surprised by it.
And so, just since we're on the subject, I've asked Jordan this before, and he was like, maybe they'll just change it. Maybe it'll be a cover up, since the Gorn stuff tends to be like very classified. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, Jordan, too, if I'm wrong at any point in this, but I don't feel like they knew much about the Gorn in the original series, or if they did, they didn't let on that they did.
So Cestus 3 was supposed to be the first time they encountered the Gorn, but it's interesting. It's in season 1 of Discovery, in Lorca's trophy room. You actually see like a Gorn skull in the background. So it was like, okay, something's different.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
I was just going to say, so maybe it will be like a whole cover up Starfleet conspiracy thing. I don't know. But my theory as to why they're going to be slow and like completely like antithetical to how they are now when they fight Gorn. Like they're still formidable, but they're much different. I have a suspicion that La'an or Starfleet will make some kind of biological weapon that will basically neuter and make the Gorn way more like less powerful and less intelligent, less strong, to kind of like make them not as formidable of an enemy, which is why they are the way they are in the original series.
We're also assuming that there's only one species of Gorn, you know?
Right.
There could be variations, and not to get too deep a rabbit hole, but in discussion with the timeline, first off, I thought what they did was brilliant. I don't know if the producers explained it the best way they probably could. This is more in like if you watch the Ready Room or read articles, but basically they can do whatever they want because with the changes in the timeline, it's not going to screw everything up. You just say, oh, the timeline's changed. And if you really want to dig into the nitty gritty of it, any canon issue in Star Trek, they have basically covered. It's like, oh, well, you know, Spock talks about Khan leaving Earth in 1996 in the original series. Okay, this is before the timeline changed. But Voyager, mini spoilers, Byron, Voyager goes to 1996 in season 3 in Future's End, and there is no reference, no nothing about Khan. So has the timeline already changed and we just weren't aware of it? They've basically covered every inconsistency there ever has been in Star Trek can now be attributed to this. And you can just like, oh, okay, that's why.
Yeah, it can be easily hand waved. And that's kind of the interesting thing is like those little story instances like that. I like that there's a canon, like hand waving explanation rather than like a bunch of headcanon theories floating around the internet. And the last thing on my Gorn theory is, do you guys remember the TNG episode where they get Hugh and they think about infecting him with that virus to basically kill all the Borg?
Yes.
Imagine that, but flipped on its head with the Gorn, and they actually go through with it. And that's why it's the big cover up. And why in the original series they know like nothing about them. Just an idea. Could be fun.
Interesting.
That would be very interesting, actually, because it is one thing with the new Trek that I have appreciated is that they have delved a little bit into the darker side of the Federation, you know, and showing that it's not quite as, you know, as rosy, you know, as some of the older shows, you know, showed. Now, that being said, you know, TNG had its fair share of negativity towards the Federation. But I have enjoyed that the new shows have kind of, you know, put that out there a little bit, that if you have a utopia, you know, there has to be a little bit of darkness underneath that's helping that utopia run. So I would not be surprised if we did get something like that with the Gorn, especially with La'an, because, you know, we see she does not have kind feelings towards the Gorn at all.
Could also explain why she's like never referenced, and like her ultimate destiny with her last name is going to tie in somehow. I just don't know how yet. So I'm very excited to see where they go with a lot of these characters.
Yeah. You know, and I think honestly that, you know, that kind of is a perfect segue, you know, into our next section of talking about these characters, you know, especially this season and just the journeys they've been on. You know, why don't we start with La'an, since we were just talking about her a little bit? We can, I feel like she got a lot of development this season. With some great stories, and you know, her story got pushed forward quite a bit. What do you guys think?
Oh, I completely agree, because like, so, I mean, as you can tell, my brother and I are big fans. It runs in the family. I watch these episodes with my mom and dad literally every week. I watch it in the morning to avoid spoilers, and then I go watch it with my mom and dad after work. And then I bug Curry till he watches it. So, and ironically, we actually got our youngest brother, Jamie, shout out to you, Jamie, to actually watch it, and he loved it. So, but anyways, like La'an was kind of annoying, and she was just somebody who didn't really like season 1. And then you get to this season, and you know, the whole thing where she falls for the alternate Kirk and then he dies, and then everything in the musical, I'm like, you have so much sympathy for her, and she's like, you can connect with her, and she's grown so much. I'm like, I want to see more.
It definitely felt like in season 1, I liked her. I think they had a little bit of trouble justifying why she was a Noonien Singh, but her background with the Gorn was always the most interesting part. But now they're tying into all that a little bit more, and how not her last name doesn't necessarily mean anything for story, but what it means for her character and her insecurities. And I thought the musical episode really brought that out, but also just shout out, I can't remember the actress's name, shout out to her. Her singing voice was incredible. And I think she had the most impressive one out of the whole cast. Like, she had like the showstopper song, in my opinion.
She actually just released like a single like the week before the musical episode came out.
Yeah, she was so good. And I also think her ultimate destiny that I kind of questioned earlier, has already been answered. I think that what essentially is Star Trek's like Time Variance Authority or whatever it's called, the TVA of Star Trek, the Time Patrol. I think she'll end up joining them, and that'll explain why she's not really in anything going forward or never referenced, because they don't exist, quote unquote. But I really appreciated her journey here, and I think she'll play even more of a role going forward with the time travel stuff and with the Gorn coming forefront and center.
I have an interesting idea / theory to run by you guys. With her last name, they've been focusing more about her history with the Gorn. Eventually, she's going to have to come to terms with her family name. And now that they've talked about stuff with the timeline, does it not seem like eventually we're going to have some time travel or time displacement episode and she meets Khan? It just it's too perfect not to do.
Well, they've already set it up because she did meet Khan. She met young Kid Khan, so it's going to happen again. It's going to be the payoff from that because he's going to remember her.
I absolutely agree with you guys. I think something is going to happen that we are going to see an adult Khan. I feel like the various shows have been teasing it too much because we've obviously had her whole storyline, the story of Khan as a kid, her going to the alternate timeline. And we also, saw the little tease of it in Picard season 2, with I can't remember which data relative it was who worked with Khan, but it showed the Project Khan folder that he was working on. So I definitely feel like they have some type of plan that they're gonna bring some form of Khan in at some point. And I agree. I think it's going to be one of the payoffs of her character.
Khan's going to be like the Thanos or Kang from Star Trek, and he's going to destroy all the timelines where he doesn't win.
It's going to be interesting. And like, I also feel like we could possibly see something with her storyline and possibly some augmentations coming out, because they kind of teased that in the one episode of, I can't remember what they mentioned, where they said something about your family's natural augments or something.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Because they straight up ask her, number one asks her if she's like inherited, or somebody asked her if she's inherited the abilities, and she says yes. Mm-hmm. I'm like, wait, what?
Mm-hmm.
They like never show that. Does she hide it? I feel like that was an area that could clear up a little bit.
Well, after the whole thing with Una, she would definitely want to hide it, with Una's whole trial and augmentation. So it makes sense why she's hiding it, because they sort of shied away from that in season 1. But like you guys said, when she's asked about it, she just nods or says yes. So it's going to be very interesting to see where this plot line goes.
I also really love how they handled her relationship with Kirk. I thought it was believable and not overdone, and just absolutely like heartbreaking when she basically pursues him and he's like, I'm sorry, but like I'm expecting a child, and with Carol Marcus, I was like, oh man, because I was texting Jordan, he got like a live reaction. Say that again, I'm sorry.
Oh, I said I felt the pain of that shutdown.
Yeah, I was like, man, I've never seen Kirk friend zone somebody, but wow.
Yeah, that was weird seeing Kirk friend zone somebody. But another interesting callback to season 1, and for the quality of the writing, and these guys have their crap together, which a lot of shows don't, which is just wonderful. When she beams over in the season 1 finale, she's the first officer under Kirk on the Farragut. So yes, she did get friend zoned, but we all know what happens between Carol Marcus and Kirk. So I hate to say like she's the fallback, or does something come later?
Yeah, that's true.
Are they foreshadowing stuff we didn't even know they were foreshadowing?
Yeah. I'm also like, okay, Kirk, if you have a thing for a Noonien saying, why do you have no idea who Khan is in the original series?
There was almost like one theory too that I wondered about that, and I don't know if they're going to go this direction or not, but I almost wondered if they're going to end up shaping her up as almost being like a villain of the show. And I don't know, because I kind of thought, okay, she inherited, these abilities that obviously she's keeping quiet. She's had her, heart broken by Kirk. And then I thought it was kind of interesting too that in the song that she sings, that she, at the end of the song, most of the songs that we see with the various characters are some type of them finding themselves, them moving on past something, or becoming a better person. And I noticed that with her song, she actually gets to the end of it and she basically doesn't choose to do any type of change. That she talks about, she still has all this fear, she has no faith, and basically almost is kind of like, I'm not going to change, I'm not going to shift my, or paradigm or something like that. And so it kind of made me wonder, I don't know if they're going to end up forming her into a show villain. I don't know, but I'd be very interested if they did go that direction.
Yeah,
that's
there's definitely
really
a greater destiny there for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that's really interesting. So it's like, if Kirk ends up with her, I mean, we have a whole new reason for Wrath of Khan.
It's more like Wrath of La'an.
Yeah.
I'd watch that.
I never even realized how close their names were, literally, until right then.
I'm imagining Shatner screaming La'an like from Wrath of Khan, and I'm cracking up.
Speaking of Screaming Khan, I don't know if this is a good segue for you, Byron, but how do y'all feel about Kirk in this season?
Ooh, that's a great segue, actually.
Byron, you go ahead.
You know what? I honestly have slightly mixed feelings. Very slight. Like I feel like out of all the characters and legacy characters that are in this show, I feel like he's the weakest of them. And I don't want that to sound overly negative, because I'm not overly negative about him. But because I keep trying to remember this is a younger version of Kirk. But I don't know. I think they maybe could have done a little bit better with the closer resemblance. I feel like he doesn't quite look like William Shatner quite enough. But overall, I warmed to his character a lot this season as we continued over, and especially the alternate timeline episode. I thought he was really good in. He had some great Kirk one-liners in the musical episode as well. So overall, I like him, but I definitely need to see more of him, and I think he needs to be on the show more in order for people to warm to him.
I agree. Go ahead, Curry.
Okay. I would largely agree with that. I think based on season 1, it was such like a shock to see him, and knowing we were going to get more. Whenever they're in like close up, I'm like, yeah, I can see him as Kirk. His hair's not blonde enough, like the shallow stuff. His hair's not blonde enough, and they cut to wide shot, and I'm like, he's very thin for a Kirk actor. Chris Pine was a little bit above her, so was William Shatner. That's the shallow stuff. Appearances, I don't care as much about as I do performance. His performance is there, and I feel like they're trying to marry the Chris Pine iteration with the original series iteration a little bit and kind of find a balance between the two. That's how he feels to me. And I think the personality quirks are there, but like you said, I think he'll just grow over time. Every time he showed up, I feel like he got better and better. Like, he does things that are very Kirk oriented. The alternate reality Kirk, I thought, was a great way to kind of explore his own unique take on it. I definitely think, with all the original series members kind of popping up everywhere on the show, Jordy and I have this theory that they're going to make a sequel to the original series, maybe set after the motion picture, in that 12-year timeline or time frame between motion picture and Wrath of Khan. And if he was leading a show, I could see them really giving it more development. But it's hard to adjust to a new Kirk. It was hard with Chris Pine at first. Nobody's going to be William Shatner. So he has a lot to live up to. But the fact that you don't immediately hate him, the fact that he is likable, and they've gotten us this far without being too skeptical, I feel like is a win overall.
Absolutely. I have something to mention about the sequel show, but Jordan, what's your take on this new Kirk?
So I agree with everything you guys said, and I think a lot of people have had a bit. If you think about it, he's played 3 different iterations of Kirk. You've got the alternate timeline where Pike jumps to the future at the end of season 1. Then you've got the second alternate timeline Kirk from the beginning of this season, and then we actually get to see young Lieutenant Kirk. So I think people sort of had a little bit of, they had to resolve a few things and realize, these are technically 3 separate people. But it's like you said, I mean, he is a lot thinner than Shatner, but again, that's shallow stuff. You just let that go. But every subsequent appearance of him, I like him more and more. So I'm with you guys completely.
I remember I loved his line in the musical episode where he said, "I just had assumed this is something you had planned."
Most Kirk thing ever.
Yes.
It really was. Oh, and I do agree with you guys that it does feel like they're planning some type of follow up to the original series / movies. Because we're seeing so many of these legacy characters popping up. The fact that Kirk is getting such a spotlight in this show, which is something I did not expect. I expected maybe to get one cameo of him. And so the fact that he's been this, constant presence kind of overall does make me wonder if they are planning something, a phase 2 of some sort or whatever after Strange New Worlds is finished, or who knows, even running alongside of it.
I've also seen theories that like after Strange New Worlds, like season 5, it'll still be Strange New Worlds, but Kirk will just take over, like Power Rangers, like would shift. Red Rangers, like Turbo shifted from Tommy to the other guy in the middle of season of Turbo or whatever. But I don't think they do that. I think they make it a whole new thing, personally.
Yeah, that is very interesting, because I mean that theory is not, like you said, it's not out of bounds, because the 5th season of TV shows generally is some, where they conclude some type of overarching story or whatever. So it's like at the end of season 5, we could see, Pike, have his accident and everything. But yeah, like you said, I don't know, that would be risky because everybody really does like his character. So that would be a risk. But
more sense.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it makes more sense to finish Strange New Worlds, and then they start something with Kirk, and they have the time jump. Original series happened. You're not messing with people's memories,
mm-hmm.
and then the reason I mentioned the motion picture, Star Trek 1, is that is actually canonically only set 3 years after the original series, even though everybody's like 10 years older or 15 years older or whatever, and they're like Kirk clearly has a worse toupee. It's still technically only 3 years, and then there's that big time jump before Wrath of Khan, and that is pretty much uncharted territory, other than I think some books that may or may not be canon. So they could do whatever they wanted with, and they have almost everybody recast.
That's very, very true. I that was actually something I was not familiar with. I did not know that there was that big of a time jump between motion picture and Wrath of Khan. I always knew there was a time jump just from, with what they did, but I didn't know it was 12 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, that definitely opens up a lot of possibilities. And, I've often wondered if we're starting to see, like a new trend with Star Trek shows that originally it was 7 years. I'm almost wondering now with Disco ending at season 5, is that going to be the new trend now? They're going to go 5 years and then like do a new show. So I'm not sure.
Interesting point. But no, I agree with what you guys said. And the new show, the other thing I wanted to bring up, if you look at the ages, I mean, we all know the only one that there's a little bit of a discrepancy is Scotty should be a little bit older than Kirk, but maybe he just is youthful looking. Again, it's one of the shallow things you can let go. Paul Wesley, I believe, is 41. So say we go 5 seasons of Strange New Worlds. Do you really want a 45-year-old playing like a 31-year-old Captain Kirk? Because eventually it's going to look like, if you were to do like an original series reboot, it's going to look weird. However, if you jump to the phase 2 era, say 22, 73, 74, and do a second 5-year mission, you kind of get all the ages to line up really nicely. And it just doesn't look like, I don't know, like in the Highlander movies when they would bring some of the original actors back for like Endgame, like the wife Curry, and she's supposed to be young and she's clearly in her mid 50s and playing like a 30-year-old. It just doesn't work.
How Connor McLeod is supposed to be like 20 years old, but he looks like a 55-year-old man.
Exactly.
Shout out to Highlander Endgame though, you're underrated.
Yeah.
Actually, I have if you don't mind, I have a bit of a segue. So I love that they're introducing the legacy characters. I'm not complaining about that at all. I love it. And like we get to see how Kirk met Spock, and the fact that Spock stole the Enterprise before Kirk was brilliant. Like that's just so awesome. A complaint's not even the right word, but like this show really needs 13 episodes a season because the cast is so good, and it's a large cast. Like we haven't gotten enough Ortegas. Like she still needs her own episode. but we need to maintain while we're adding these legacy characters as well. So like I was talking to our brother Jamie, and he's like, I feel like they're taking away from the current crop of characters by introducing the legacy characters. And I'm taking away is the strong term, I think, in my opinion, but you've only got so much time and so much you can do in 10 episodes. What do you guys think?
I absolutely agree. I think that they need more episodes, and I know the showrunner is on board for more, because the thing is that, honestly, I kind of feel like doing more episodes also is more cost effective. You keep more people on your streaming service, you keep more people engaged.
I see what you did there.
And also too, like, I know a lot of people bring up budgetary issues, saying like, oh, the episodes are expensive, and everything. But, you look at some of the episodes of this season, some of the best episodes were bottle episodes.
Yes.
You don't, the musical episode was very much a bottle episode. There was other ones that were very, very small. And it's like, okay, you don't always need to have these amazing special effects. TNG showed that, if you have a good story with these excellent characters, people will watch. And, and I 100% agree that expanding the episode count will allow, these characters to flourish, because exactly what you said, Jordan, Ortegas, we haven't gotten an episode with her yet. And especially this season, I warmed to her so much more, and I was like, oh, I want to know more about her. So yeah, definitely agree. What do you think, Curry?
I think I definitely share the budgetary concerns when it comes to like the VFX, and I kind of like to call this the Superman and Lois problem. Mm-hmm. Superman and Lois, I've only seen season 1, but that show, for being a low budget CW show that has 15 episodes, as opposed to like 23, it looks phenomenal.
Oh yeah.
It can't compare to Strange New Worlds, but Superman and Lois had too many episodes. I remember in season 1, it got to like episode 12 or 13, and this big like finale feeling happens, only for 2 episodes to come, and they kind of repeat the same conflict. Like they didn't really know where else to go. So you don't want it to get to a point where it feels like the season has no direction, and like it's not filler, but what people would describe as filler. But I do think there's a sweet spot somewhere between like 8 and 13 episodes, depending on what type of show you are. 10 seems to really be working with them as far as consistency goes. But Jordy brings up a good point in saying that as they introduce more characters and more series regulars with the original cast, like being recasted or whatnot, then there's not enough room for everything. Like, can they test it out with 11 or 12 or hopefully even 13 episode orders? And you think about the fact that Discovery is ending, maybe that will allow a little bit more of budgetary freedom that can consolidate into Strange New Worlds. Maybe that's already the plan. But at the same time, I would much rather them give us 10 bangers than 8 bangers and 5 okay episodes. You know what I mean?
Filler episodes. I agree with you there.
Like, and it's hard to have filler in Star Trek because they tend to be standalone adventures. Filler is more like, we have the cutaway from Pike at the end of the season, which made me so mad. But, and then like the next episode is about like Kirk's grandfather. Like that would be filler by definition. But I don't know. I would definitely take more, but I don't want to demand more and then we actually end up having less. Sometimes less is more. I think if they do it right, and they've done it right so far, because then it could be fine. Because this show has been so consistent, and if it stays this consistent, it could very well go down as one of the, if not the best Star Trek show eventually. I'm not ready to give it that yet, but
no, yeah, I agree. I'm in the same boat. I would love more episodes, but only if they can keep the same quality of writing, of pace and everything. So yeah, I totally agree. One thing actually, well, we'll come back to this. It was a thought that I had, but we'll come back to it. So what are some other characters that you guys feel were standouts, this season, who maybe you weren't expecting to be quite as standout?
I would have to probably say M'Benga. He was just
so
fantastic this year. Like, in Babs, I'm not going to even attempt to butcher his last name, but I mean, so it was interesting that first little bit where we got the tease of the super serum, for lack of a better term, where they juiced up. And then when we get to episode 8, I believe, where the whole yeah, and he with the Klingon ambassador, I'm just like, oh wow, like a completely different side of this character you weren't expecting at all. And then it leaves that whole open-ended question, like, did he do it? Was it the heat of the moment? I think Kerr and I have a little bit of a difference of opinion on exactly what happened, because I'm pretty sure he killed the Klingon. But I like to think he didn't.
He killed him, for sure. It's just the manner of which he killed them is the question.
Like, did he snap? Was there a struggle? Yeah, I mean, yeah.
No, honestly, like that, I agree with you. His character was so good this season, and that particular episode was just, oh my gosh, that episode took me back to like TNG, of like, I was like, this is like TNG quality writing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So good. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He was definitely the standout.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when they did the super soldier serum, I got really nervous at first. I was like, oh no. Like, this is just an excuse for them to fist fight Klingons, but whatever, I'll take it. The action is great. But then how they end up using it, like, it not as a crush, but it was like a decommissioned thing that he saved because of the Klingon conflict. And like him being like, I forgot what they said his name was, but he was like the great assassin of the Klingon Wars. I was not expecting that, especially from like the medical doctor who you kind of forget is on the original series. It also, like, in the action sequences, he just excelled, the actor. I can't remember, Jordy, I don't know his name either. But he's also excelled in other roles with action. Like, he was in Dune Part 1, and he did absolutely phenomenal in his fight scenes in that. And it just made me think, like, I want that actor to have more. I know Mahershala Ali is supposed to play Blade in the MCU, but he would be perfect.
Oh my God, yes. I never thought about it, but you totally nailed that.
His voice would make him iconic. And there's been talk that Ali might drop out. There's been rumors and stuff. If they do, I hope he gets a shot because he's just so good.
Oh, he would be fantastic. Oh, and
you know what? Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, since we're talking about this character, and everything, let's get into a little bit of our ideas of did he murder the ambassador or not? Because I feel like there's definitely some opinions that we have here. So since we're talking about the character, let's get into it a little bit.
Yeah, you go first, Byron.
Okay. I have slightly mixed feelings, but because I feel like they did do a good job of showcasing how it could have gone either way. The ambassador definitely was faced with losing his entire, legacy basically with the Federation. He would have been kicked out of the Federation. He couldn't go back to the Klingons because they saw him as a traitor. So I definitely could see him trying to kill the Doctor, in the sense of, okay, he has nothing to lose. But at the same time, I don't know. I really feel like Mbenga killed him because of that one line in the beginning when he says, why wouldn't you just, what did he say? Why don't you leave me alone? Or why didn't you leave me alone? I can't remember. It feels like a man who's about to snap. I don't know.
I'm inclined to agree with you. He asked him to stop because he knows he's like on that edge. He's on the precipice and he's trying to maintain control and not cross that line. And there's the struggle. And the thing that seals it for me, when Chapel is being interviewed, what you see in the background, she says Doc Raw pulled the knife, not Mbenga. She's clearly lying and covering it. You could see in her face, she knows. That's why I think I'm like, he snapped and killed him. And they're tight, so she covered for him.
So I think it's a little bit of everything. I definitely do not think it's the theory that the Klingon killed himself out of some kind of thing. There's that was like a big thing on Reddit, they committing seppuku. Yeah, I do not think it's that. What we can see and what we can hear are our biggest clues. Mbenga asks him multiple times to leave him be. The Klingon won't. He puts his hands on Mbenga and clearly starts a struggle. And then he ends up getting killed. So I think it's a little bit of a both and. I do think Mbenga snapped and killed him. But what does he tell Pike at the end? He doesn't tell Pike he didn't kill him. He doesn't tell Pike that he was remorseful. He just says to Pike, I didn't start the fight. And Mbenga doesn't lie. And Nurse Chapel, Jordy's right though. there's definitely a cover up where they may be stretching the truth a little bit, that it may not have been the attack that it was, but the ambassador definitely put his hands on him, and there was definitely some kind of like shuffling struggle. Because if you go back and watch it, there's like, you watch the arms of the Klingon, and it almost looks like he's shaking him and grabbing him. And I think Mbenga was like, give me an excuse. And he set up the scenario to where if it came to it and he felt threatened, he wasn't going to hold back anymore. And so that's what he did.
And we do also see early on in the episode that the ambassador is kind of feigning weakness, I guess you could say. You know, we do see that he is a lot more strong and powerful than he's showcasing to the Federation.
It's also very clear that when he's like doing the hand-to-hand like sparring with Mbenga, that Mbenga's holding back, almost like he's feeling him out, studying him, getting his weaknesses. And it also lets the Klingon, I can't remember his name at the moment, but feel a sense of power, like, oh, I can beat him in a fight. So if he did start a struggle, he felt like he wouldn't be threatened, and then Mbenga quickly just fatality that guy.
I've been
playing a lot of Mortal Kombat lately, so
yeah, I can't remember the actor who played the ambassador. I've seen him in quite a lot, but I cannot remember his name. But he was really good. I thought he played the Klingon ambassador really well, I thought.
The best thing, I was texting George after pretty much every episode, and he said, we both agreed it makes for a fascinating, like, ambiguous ending for us to debate for years to come, which is classic Star Trek. But I'm kind of sad he died because there's so much potential as a character there.
Dang.
Yeah, I would totally agree. What do you think, Jordan?
Yeah, it's like a Klingon ambassador serving with the Federation, like a Federation ambassador who's a Klingon. Like, this is even before like we meet the Organians and all this. We're coming off that war and Discovery, and it's like, it's very interesting. Well, what they could do, I mean, because with Klingon culture, there's enough between the blood oaths and the right of vengeance, and I know I'm doing a deep cut. What if his, when he left the Klingon Empire, what if his son was received discommendation like Worf? Do we get a revenge plot in a future season where his son knows his father wouldn't have done this and shows up and is after Mbenga? Like, there's still some story possibilities here. It would be very interesting to see where this goes as well.
I would be. Oh, go for it, Corey.
I was going to change subject back to Mbenga a little bit, but go ahead, Byron.
I was going to say that would be very interesting because I'm always on board for more Klingon content in Star Trek. Yeah. We've had some fantastic episodes with Klingons over the course of the franchise. So yeah, I would definitely be down for that. And I agree with you, Jordan. I think with what happened with the ambassador, with the Klingons, like you said, he had family, back on Kronos. So it's like, that had to have affected it some way. So I think we could easily go back and see more from that conflict.
Also, I think there's so much to unpack even more from that ending. Earlier in the episode, the ambassador says, I killed all my commanders. And they make asking which one was the hardest to kill. And then you find out it was actually Mbenga that did it. Like, that was the twist that I was like, oh my gosh, he's been sizing him up this whole episode. So of course he killed him at the end. Yeah. It's just in a matter of was it outright murder? Was it premeditated? Did he set up the scenario? Or did literally that Klingon guy, he started something and Mbenga's like, no, not again. You're not getting away with it. But there is still a cover up because Nurse Chapel covering for him. And they say, oh, all the DNA from all his commanders are there. So this knife belonged to him. Because they believe he killed all the commanders. They don't know Mbenga did it. So it's a perfect cover for him being able to finally just finish the war that he started.
And, that's interesting because I actually hadn't really thought about that, of how, no one knew he had the knife. No one knew that he was the assassin. That could also open up a huge amount of storylines later on of Section 31 blackmailing him into doing things. If they are like, hey, we know what you did, so now you have to work for us and do this, otherwise it's going to come out or something. That could
allow for a role if they ever do like the Phase 2 show with Kirk. It could be a way for Mbenga to come back since he knows that crew from the original series too. Like a really interesting way to tie him back in.
or it explains why he's not on the Enterprise and McCoy replaced him as chief medical officer during original series.
I thought about that too. But isn't he on the Enterprise in a couple episodes where he fills
He's
in?
on there, but you don't know. I mean, he could be visiting. He's on two episodes in season 2. So is he just like a visiting physician? Was it like a temporary assignment? Was he visiting Chapel, one of his old friends? They could go in all sorts of directions.
He's definitely the standout character, though, in my opinion.
Definitely. I think he was excellent. And I think that's actually, a great way for us to talk about this next character. I think since her connection to M'Benga is Nurse Chapel.
I was about to say the same thing.
A character who I honestly I was not super crazy about in season 1. I thought, the actress Jess Bush did a good job. I thought, she was a good character, but she got a lot of focus this season, and I ended up really, really liking her character a lot. What do you guys think?
Go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, I love the agency that she's given. I love her background as a veteran of the Klingon War with M'Benga. Her application to the Vulcan Academy stuff was it was okay. It kind of felt like you're and not commenting on anything, but it kind of felt like your typical feminist story, they're being rejected by the people who think they're better because she's human, not because she's woman, but she is good enough. There's definitely some allegory there, but her stuff with Spock, I kind of felt like was the weakest part of the season. I did not expect them to go ahead with that romance, especially considering the will they won't they of the original series. But it moves very fast, and then it's very quickly kind of brushed aside, and Spock's just heartbroken. She just out of nowhere, because Spock decided to check to see if she was okay, said she wanted to break up with him, and it's just kind of over, and they don't speak anymore. I don't know. That whole thing was the messiest part of the season for me. Even though I felt for Spock and I felt like the execution with the performances was well, the writing didn't quite match up with what they were trying to accomplish.
You make a lot of really good points. We knew they were going to get together eventually. It did come a little quick, and poor Spock. I mean, that guy's got terrible luck. He tries to help T'Pring out, and she gets all bent out of shape and leaves him hanging. Then he tries it with Chapel, and she literally breaks up with him in a song in the ship's bar in front of God and everybody.
Yeah, it was messed up.
It was really harsh, and then he still saves her.
And I guess it's kind of an interesting way to kind of keep them apart for the future. Spock wasn't the one who ended it, but she broke his heart, which is why he keeps her at arm's distance, and she regrets it. It informs it. I think it's a good idea on paper. I just think maybe it happened a little fast, and cementing that in the musical episode may not have been the best way to kind of cap that off. Obviously, it'll come back, but still.
They had to do it soon, though, because Roger Corby, from What Are Little Girls Made Of, she meets him and becomes engaged to him in 20. It's right where the timeline is, unless they weren't going to shift it, but we didn't know that at the time. That's where she meets up and becomes engaged to him before he disappears. So, because that's the internship, whatever the thing was, the fellowship she was applying for is with Dr. Corby. So that's going to be interesting to see when they're going to make it a love triangle.
Okay, see, I didn't know that. So that makes me feel a little bit better about the why. I still have mixed feelings about, because literally it's after something happens and Spock literally goes essentially, are you okay? I'm just trying to check in on you and be more communicative about this. And she's back off, I need space. You're what?
Yeah, I agree. I think that was probably the weakest storyline of the season, and I almost feel I don't know. I feel they almost stretched it a little bit too long. That kind of having it be the, what would you call it, the B plot maybe of several episodes instead of maybe being the A plot of 2 might have been not the best decision. I would have rather had, maybe 2 episodes that were very much focused on their relationship, and then seeing it kind of come together and then maybe end, versus, being in 6 parts, over the course of the season. So I definitely do agree, but I do feel better now that you mentioned that, Jordan, that there does seem to be a story reasoning for why they kind of ended it. But yeah, I do wish that they would have maybe written it a little bit tighter.
Yeah, and I think too it feels fast, especially binging the show, because there's that whole big like climactic moment where she confesses to that alien like, "Hey, I love Spock. I need you to change him back to the way he was." And their feelings finally come out, and then like 2 episodes later they break up. Like, wait, why?
No, I definitely agree. And so yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how they can continue that, or or if they just brush it aside, or what they're gonna do for season 3 and on. It'll be interesting, definitely. So yeah. Well, what were some other characters that you guys felt for standouts? Or I guess before we move into open, one character that's kind of just right out there that we haven't really talked about that much is Ethan Peck as Spock. What do we think about his role this season? For me, I thought he was vastly improved from season 1, where he was already good. But what do you guys think?
He's getting better and better.
I think the best compliment I can give him, and Zachary Quinto did a great job with Spock and his roles, but it was a little bit different kind of Spock, with his mother dying in front of him. Ethan Peck is such a worthy successor to Leonard Nimoy. And if Leonard Nimoy were still alive, I think he would absolutely love what Ethan Peck is doing. And I don't think you can have a bigger compliment, in regards to his performance about Spock. He's fantastic.
He balances out the curious nature of Spock as well as like the logical one, but also like he's really good at leveraging the humor out of that. Like the whole "I would like the ship to go now," like that was one of the best gags of the whole season. That was so funny. I also like to refer to him as Swole Spock because that dude is absolutely jacked.
Yeah, he is.
The singing episode, like I love how Spock's innermost feelings are just like, "Why am I singing?" And like I don't know, man. He doesn't try to be Nimoy, but you can still tell he's being Spock, and that's what I appreciate the most about it.
That's actually funny when you mentioned like Swole Spock, because I loved how they had that reference in the Lower Decks crossover, where Beckett Mariner is like, "Whoa, you never told me Spock was so hot."
That was a good crossover too. As someone who's never watched Lower Decks, I was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed that episode. The Riker chair moment.
Oh my God. When he yells Riker and he hops on the saddle, I thought I was going to die.
Oh, that episode was very, very well done. It was the one I was most nervous about, honestly. But it turned out there was a behind the scenes moment I read about that was just hilarious. I can't remember. It was basically, they said it was when they were filming it, and he was in Jack Quaid was in the dressing room, and they were doing his hair. And I guess that the costumers wanted it basically to be, not quite as a purple. And so they kept trying to tone it down. And they said that every time they tried to tone it down, they said Jonathan Frakes kept yelling, "I need more purple, more." It's like, oh. It was really funny, but yeah, it was definitely a better episode than I expected. But yeah, I agree with you guys. I think Ethan Peck is just knocking it out of the park, and I agree that I think Leonard Nimoy would love his performance if he was here.
His song about the after he gets dumped in engineering, where he's singing with Uhura, is okay. So I'm an engineer and I do math all the time. So when he's talking about solving for X and then relating it to being the X in the situation, was like
Genius.
It's genius, and it's the most Spock thing you could do, because he's literally transcribing it in his mind in terms of mathematics, and like there's no more, you can't get more Spock than that.
I definitely agree.
It's Spock just gets so many wonderful moments. You can tell they know that Spock is just that legendary character on the show. Not that Pike isn't, not that others aren't, but there's a concentrated effort on realizing why Spock is the way he is in the original series and why he has the armor of logic that he does, and how Kirk, of all people, is able to pierce that armor eventually to where he becomes the Spock that dies for the crew and says, I am and always shall be your friend. you can really see that they're trying to form that early part of his character arc that it's working.
And they also realize that, I mean, if you had to break it down in Star Trek, who's the main character outside of the ship, and there's been a lot of Enterprises and other ships, but it basically is Spock. He is the most important character in the Star Trek universe.
No, honestly, I would agree with that, because you see, you know, what does every show, you know, come back to at some point? I mean, TNG, came back to Spock. We had Discovery even had, multiple references to Spock. He was the character young. They had a recording of him when he was older. So I definitely agree that he really is the central character, to the franchise that every show keeps coming back to in some way.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. I will say I did get a little bit of a feeling this season, though. And this, I don't want to say this is a negative, but it also was. I kind of feel like Pike got a little overshadowed.
There's a reason for that.
I mean, I know there's a lot of other characters, and I'll let you give me the story reason, I'm sure, in a minute. But I missed him in a lot of the episodes. And his relationship with the other officer, like, it wasn't bad. It was done well. But sometimes it felt like they needed just a little bit of drama, so they gave him a romantic, like, hardship. Which obviously seems to be paying off with what they did in the last episode with her getting infected with the Gorn. But like the episode where they're on the planet where they like forget things, that was a fantastic and terrifying premise that I thought was really well done. And I loved that Pike was like the big central focus of that one. It just was nice to see the captain doing captain's things with captainly mannerisms and captainly things. I just love it when they focus on the captains. Because, without the captain, what's the show, right? And that's the Discovery problem. Like, without the captain, what's really the show? Now, that's someone who hasn't watched season 3 and 4. But I don't know. I kind of felt like Pike was overshadowed. But, Jordy, obviously, you have something that...
So, first off, you're absolutely right. I don't think you can ever have too much Pike. Like you said, the captain is normally always the focus, and you never can have too much of the captain. There's actually not a story reason. Anson Mount and his wife had a baby like right as season 2 started filming, so I think that's why he was out. Because that first episode, he's going to get the lawyer chick from the second episode, so that he's like hardly in it at all. That's I think why he bowed out for maybe not a few episodes, but he wasn't as prominent this season as he was in season 1.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense, because I did feel that way in this season, where I was a little disappointed that we didn't see near as much of him as we did in season 1. But that makes a lot of sense, that if he had family commitments going on, because he probably, judging by some of how little he was in some of the episodes, he was probably able to film a lot of his scenes, over a much shorter period of time than other characters were able to.
I do love that Pike just gets so many humorous moments, and they show his lighter side. Like the episode, the Lower Decks one, like he doesn't want to know about his future, but he obviously knows his future. So when he finds out about the stuff like named after him and all, he's like, "Oh wow, actually that's pretty cool." And then they tell me he has great hair, and he's like, "Oh well,
Pike speak."
I was like, Pike does have the best hair of any Star Trek captain, like no doubt about it. I'm just glad they made a reference to it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It was funny when I was watching it with my mom. She was like, "He has glorious hair." It's like, oh man. And I do like that they embraced the gray in his hair this season. Way more than they did last season and in Discovery. So
it just makes him look distinguished.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Oh man. Well, as we come to a conclusion of this first episode here, is there any final thoughts that you guys, have on these character journeys, or any last standouts that you would like to mention?
Oh man, there's so many. I mean, I feel like every character pretty much grew this season. We got to know them better. The courtroom drama. I mean, Star Trek always does great courtroom dramas, but like Una was great to get more development for her, and the whole joke about her being on the poster, and it's the recruitment poster, not a pinup. Yeah. That was great. Also, this entire cast can sing, so I don't think anyone is opposed to another musical episode, because that was absolutely delightful.
I love that they found a way to like perfectly explain it scientifically too. Maybe not perfectly, but like it worked for me. You know?
There's a story reason. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I was worried about them not having a story reason, and I really did enjoy that they that they made it very Star Trek.
I mean, and calling it Subspace Rhapsody is just genius. Like,
Oh,
what
brilliant.
a perfect title name. You know, and I think about certain episodes, like I thought Uhura was really good this season. Her like kind of focus episode I thought was one of the weaker ones. But it wasn't bad. It was still really good. It was very interesting, you know, that there were like some kind of beings that lived in basically the starship gas in that area. I thought that was a really like unique take. And I'm just excited to see more. I think the biggest frustration, and this is not from like a negative standpoint, is like I was so excited, and then the show pulls that cliffhanger, and knowing like the writers and actors strike is going on as of this recording, like knowing it's going to be delayed because of that, I was just like, I want more, and I want it now. You know, it's such good Star Trek. It feels like how Star Trek should be, and you know, I have not seen Picard season 2 and 3 yet. I don't know. Picard season 3 was a big return to form for a lot of people, which I'm excited for. But it feels truly now with Strange New Worlds the way it is for me that Star Trek is back, that it's consistent, that people are realizing just how big and influential Star Trek is. If you look at the streaming charts for Strange New Worlds, and each episode continues to be memorable, but different enough from the last one to where they don't blur together. Like each one had its particular focus, a well-executed story with memorable characters. Sure, not every element was as good as others, but nothing is bad. And despite my complaints about Nurse Chapel and all that, but like even then, I've seen far worse. I was a Smallville fan for a long, long, long time, still am. And, you know, it wasn't like they drug it out like with Lana. But that being said, I'm hoping they can get season 3 underway as fast as they can, and that they continue to raise the bar like they have been for Star Trek.
You're absolutely right. I mean, they basically best of both worlds us with the finale. I'm like, it ends, and I'm like, no, because we don't know when. I mean, this could be like 2025 before this comes back, and I'm just like, I wanted to scream like Khan at my TV. I'm like, but like you said, this is one of the. If I had to pick 3 jumping on points for anybody who wanted to like start Star Trek, it's a massive undertaking. We can all agree on that. And most of the time, you either start at original series or TNG. I actually think Strange New Worlds is a really good jumping on point because, you know, is there a lot of stuff it somewhat references? Yes, but you're not completely lost if you haven't seen some of the stuff. So it gives you a taste, and then it wants you to have more. It makes you want to go find out more and watch the classic stuff. And it's just great. And also, I never knew I needed to see Klingons singing K-pop, but that was glorious.
I love how embarrassed they are about it too. You know, I did forget to mention one thing, and that was my concern. And I think I messaged our little group chat about this, about Kirk having too much interaction with Pike, given how it seems like they know each other and they've met in the original series with the way they word it, but they're not like how Spock and Pike are. They're not like close buddies and friends. So I don't want them to keep Kirk around so much that he becomes like Pike's best friend, and it doesn't really make sense with the menagerie in the original series. So that's my one concern, but they're handling it well so far.
I definitely agree. You know, and I have actually enjoyed how him being the episodes that he's been in, they've kept him away from Pike most of the time. And I've always thought that's funny, but they're handling it so far pretty well. But I agree with you. I hope that it doesn't diverge too much, you know. But then again, we can just say, hey, timeline.
That's true. And you know what? And that could be something where, like, kind of like with Discovery season 2, like half the show becomes classified and they're not ever allowed to mention this Discovery ship again. And it's like, oh, that's a cool hand wave. But I do think this show will ultimately end with Pike making the sacrifice, and we'll see some remade portions of the menagerie, and the closing will either be Pike on the planet as Kirk like flies off with the Enterprise, like knowing it's taken over. We'll probably see Kirk take over the ship and how he actually gets command, because the original series does not show that. He just is captain. And I think that's probably why they brought him in so early, so it feels earned and set up early on.
I definitely agree that I think we're going to get some remade portions of those episodes, I think, because, obviously, you can't end Strange New Worlds on a depressing note, a Pike in the, the wheelchair. So I think we're probably going to get, as much of a happy ending as we were able to get with his character. And I do agree. I think that that getting to know Kirk a little bit more will make him taking over the ship way more earned, and also could, possibly open the door to, the sequel series, possibly. Man, well, guys, thank you so much for joining me for this first episode of our retrospective of Strange New Worlds. I hope everybody listening enjoyed it, and if you did not heed my warning and you listened to this episode before seeing or finishing season 2, definitely go and finish watching it already. It's a it's a great show, and I think you'll enjoy it. And stay tuned for episode 2 of our retrospective of Strange New Worlds.